we wanted to find, when we started the company, we wanted to create the best way for investors to participate in this global movement. So putting together a portfolio of royalties, which is top line exposure, not no cost exposure, no capex, no opex, in a business which is super capital intensive and you have constant overruns all the time. So putting together this diversified portfolio of royalties on top-notch assets, really the next generation of necessary assets that will be required for the global energy transition, you have to start early and you have to be very selective in terms of the assets that you're acquiring.
Hello and welcome to Assay TV. I'm pleased to be introducing Alex Tsukernik, who is President and Chief Executive Officer of NOVR Royalty. And NOVR are building a royalty and streaming company focused on copper and nickel, vital, of course, to the clean energy transition and clean energy supply chains. So Alex, welcome.
Thanks, Adam. It's great to be here.
Yeah, what a time to be speaking with you, particularly about the commodities that you're based in. But let's focus strategically on the importance of copper to the global energy transition first. Could you take us through that?
Well, copper at this point has emerged, we believe, as the most critical commodity on the planet. The energy transition began as an environmental movement. Now, I think what you're seeing with national security considerations in terms of how Europe and North America are reacting to the dependence on Russian oil and gas, build out of renewables is becoming a national security issue. And the primary ingredient in this entire movement is copper, whether it's wind, whether it's solar, whether it's electric vehicles, whether it's associated infrastructure. We're literally entering the age of copper. So when we started NOVA, which was in 2018, the objective was to find the best way to participate in this entire movement. So having royalties on the next generation of the most important copper assets, which was our overriding imperative when we began the company, and we've accomplished a lot of that already, we thought was simply the most compelling opportunity out there. And that's exactly what we try to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Delving into that a little bit more, what can you share about the sort of scarcity of quality long-term projects that are out there, let alone the royalties on them?
There's really, we believe the hardest thing to find right now is a high-quality copper mine that's actually being advanced by a major serious company. Simply because it's difficult. First of all, the project has to meet a ton of technical specifications, geology, metallurgy, local government support, federal government support, operator willingness, financing capability. Everything has to come together just right, even for the best companies to move these things along. So, for instance, we own a royalty on Taca Taca, which is First Quantum's next major greenfield project in Argentina, which really stands out in so many ways. You have a very supportive local population. You have a project which is on a technical level, easily fits sort of at the very top of the range. And again, when you look across the mining spectrum, there's very few like that. We own the royalty on copper World and Rosemont projects, which had base advancing in Arizona, which is a similar situation. It's a clear priority for them. But when you look at a lot of the other big companies, they're not building anything right now. And because even for a large company, it's a $3, $4, $5 billion commitment. It will take you a better part of a decade. It's an enormous commitment internally of resources. So again, the scarcity here on copper is driven by two things. Number one, you have a very, very clear supply side limitation in terms of what people can do and what they're comfortable risking in terms of capital and time and resources. And of course, now you have demand coming that I don't think existed before. I mean, really at this point, in terms of renewables occupying a role in both national security and environmental consciousness, it's really becoming a clear imperative. So you have to see, I think at this point, a fundamental reshaping of where the industry sits in the world, because you simply will not be able to get the essential materials otherwise. So we took that view 4 years ago when we started the company. We were very pleased to see that this is now becoming a much more core part of the overall consciousness of the world. So we think there'll be some changes ahead for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, but just honing in on the strategic importance, obviously we've got the backdrop of a war in Ukraine and Russian sanctions that are really straining supply chains and traditional supply routes of some of these essential minerals. Would you be able to comment on what that's doing to supply chains globally?
Everything is in flux, and look, the world is getting smaller. The number of places that you could go to and mine successfully and put in some sort of long-term plans is shrinking. When we started NOVA, we took the view that was going to happen, which is why you see us oriented really in the best jurisdictions in the Americas that we feel are going to be very much part of the Western world. But yeah, everything is getting much harder.
Mm.
So the deposits that can actually go ahead in the right places with the right backing will probably have to get bigger than they were originally expected in order to provide the output that you're going to need. And the people that have them will be among the very big winners of what is going on, because you will not be able to operate in so many places as you used to. So when our first acquisition was a royalty on the Dumont project in Quebec, which is a nickel project. Although we are very much of a copper company, we love strategic nickel projects because nickel has such a clear role to play in the EV supply chain. So Dumont is the world's second largest nickel reserve, fully permitted in Quebec. Again, this is the type of project that will be critical in the new world. Yeah, so similar situation with Taca Taca, similar situation with World and Rosemont, similar situation with the projects we have in Chile, like Vizcachitas and West Wall and NOVR Union, which are all major world-class properties that will be necessary as the world transitions here. But it really will be those types of properties that will be important.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, indeed, the jurisdictional pressures are very, very real, and I suppose that relates down to the need for a diversified portfolio. You've touched on some of the assets in your portfolio, but could you elaborate a little bit more on the portfolio that you've built at Nova?
Absolutely. And this is actually, Adam, a very important point, the importance of diversification. And the challenge in an industry like copper, which although it's very large as a market, is that there's very few projects that are actually moving ahead. So globally, there's an average of one copper mine built per year, brought online, major copper mine. That's a completely different frame of reference from what you would think from a market which is, I think at this point, $300 billion a year. Imagine in a market of $300 billion a year, only one new property comes online. So the most critical thing for us, we wanted to find, when we started the company, we wanted to create the best way for investors to participate in this global movement. So putting together a portfolio of royalties, which is top line exposure, no cost exposure, no capex, no opex, in a business which is super capital intensive and you have constant overruns all the time. So putting together this diversified portfolio of royalties on top-notch assets, really the next generation of necessary assets will be required for the global energy transition. You have to start early and you have to be very selective in terms of the assets that you're acquiring. So Taca Taca, I already mentioned, World and Rosemont, I already mentioned, which is Had Bay. We also have a royalty on the West Wall project, which is in Chile, which is Anglo American and Glencore. It's a 2 billion ton property, clearly in the pipelines of both companies. 15, 20 kilometers down the road is the Vizcachitas project, which I mentioned already, also 2 billion tons and growing. That's owned by Los Andes Copper, which has emerged really as one of the clear candidates to transition to a major strategic in the next couple of years, given how the company has progressed the project. And literally, we see that as one camp, West Wall and Vizcachitas. These are the two largest undeveloped greenfield projects in Chile's second largest copper belt, which accounts for 25% of Chilean production. So you have all the infrastructure nearby. You have major mines like Pelambres and Andina nearby, Bronces. And we really think those two projects are just a logical next step at some point in this cycle to get developed. We have a royalty on the NOVR Union project, which is a joint venture of Teck and Dumont. And there, if you look at the La Fortuna property, which is it's two mines within that, La Fortuna and Relincho, we have a royalty on La Fortuna, which is probably the highest grade major copper gold deposit I'm aware of, or one of for sure. It's over 1 billion tons already. The grade is about 0.9% copper equivalent. And both companies actually show that they want to put another $150 million of additional drilling to drill it deeper. So again, when you go down the lineup, it really is just an incredible collection of scarce, super valuable deposits that are owned by serious companies that want to put them into production. We picked up our first cash flowing royalty last August that fills most of our G&A requirements on the Aranzazu mine in Mexico, which is owned by Ore Minerals. And that's really one of the most successful mid-tier copper mines that I have seen in my career, certainly. This is a business which is very capital intensive and it has a way of eating up operating profits in the way you don't expect. And that's where a lot of the mid-sized copper mines struggle. In this case, when you actually look at the job Ore has done with Aranzazu, every quarter we've seen higher production, lower costs, reserves and resources above replacement. This is a very successful mining family, the Brito family, were the founders of Yamana. And they've really proven their ability to operate this mine very well. And I believe Ore is one of the highest dividend yields in the entire North American mining sector. So it's great for us to be associated with a group like that. It fills most of our G&A requirements as we built a world-class portfolio of development assets. Because again, given the time lags, even the near-term producing copper asset will be 5 years out. That's just the nature of the industry. If you want to find something sooner, I wish you luck, but it's just something that's not available. So we have a portfolio of assets that are clearly moving ahead in this cycle. Meanwhile, we can cover our G&A, and we're also looking to add more near-term cash flowing assets so we can balance out the portfolio even more. But again, when you look at from the perspective of company building, you have to grab those tier one assets first when you can, because those opportunities just don't come along ever, actually. So when you look at, say, the precious metal space, Franco-Nevada and Wheaton Precious, these are phenomenal companies. What's allowed them to become what they are is they grab the tier one assets first. Yep. When they got started. So when we were the first company focused on copper, we wanted to grab those assets first. It was so important to do that. And that's exactly what we've done. And we've got more in the pipeline. So we're very excited by what's ahead for us as well. So hopefully that gives you a better idea for how we wanted to build Nova and what we're trying to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, you've got the 7 development stage and the 1 producing you mentioned, and you've mentioned you've got a lot in the pipeline, but can you elaborate on, how you're scaling it from here? What you said previously, you don't have targets necessarily, but you've got a huge team around the world for assets. How are you going to scale from here?
Well, when we started Nova, we had a team all around the world. There's over 20 people that are associated with the company in all the major camps, from Argentina to Chile to Peru to British Columbia, et cetera. And that's really the critical element, because again, if you want to get a royalty on a top-notch project, you're not going to be able, at least to date, walk into a major company and create one. They're well-financed. For them to give up a royalty, which is life of mine, on their prize assets in their core commodities, is just something that they really do not like to do. So the only way that a royalty is ever usually created on an asset of this quality is much earlier in its life cycle. And you're talking 30 to 40 years very often or more from exploration to production. The original prospector who finds the property at some point runs into a natural limitation on capital and expertise in terms of being able to move it along. And they sell it on to a major company that obviously can do that. As a part of that transaction, they will take a royalty as their upside participation in the project. At some point, these people also, they don't want to wait necessarily that long for production to occur, and this is where Nova steps in. But it's really cultivating those relationships. A lot of our deals have taken well over a year to get done, and so when we started the company, we mapped out literally the entire world. Every major camp in copper or nickel, every asset, every royalty holder of note, and it's really been the relationships of the team, and we're super grateful, to those collective efforts, to really just build those relationships and then transact regularly. So we went public in October 2020. We had 2 principal assets. We were still a very small company. We had royalties on Dumont and Nueva Union, and our last financing before going public was about 20 million valuation. We've done 8 transactions since being public in these 16, 17 months. And now I think we're capped around $250 million. So it really has been a great story of growth the right way on strategy. And we've only had to increase the share count by 50% since going public, and the valuation has gone up something like 12 times. And I think the market has really appreciated the quality of the assets that they're clearly advancing. Because again, I mean, you're talking about a very valuable strategic space, but the challenge, and I think what you have to do, is get assets that are actually advancing and they're really in that group that is viable. And that's exactly what we've done, where we're so pleased with the progress to date. And obviously there's more to do. I mean, when we mapped out the whole world, it doesn't mean you can buy everything in 16 months. So there's more for us to do. But obviously it builds on the efforts to date. And we have built excellent relationships, and some of those people are actually helping us get additional transactions, which is really exciting. When people you transact with, royalty holders who are now shareholders of Nova, are actually helping us do other things. So that's really exciting for us to see. And additionally, we're also looking at origination as well, particularly in private opportunities where you have strong entrepreneurs that are really putting their own money into projects, and they have good teams. So we can be a great partner for people like that. Where they don't say want dilutive financing, they don't have access to public equity markets. Nova can step up as a very, very constructive long-term partner if there's a really good team, if there's a good asset, if there's a committed equity partner we'd be very happy to partner with them in some capacity. So we're very excited about what we see in front of us, but we really have the foundation now, which is critical. Otherwise, yeah, it's very difficult to really get started in this business, and we're very excited about where we are now.
Certainly, yeah. So excellent foundations, great story and growth so far. But for investors, why royalties? Why royalties now?
Well, I think right now it's probably the best time ever to be a royalty company, because although you're seeing record high commodity prices, you're also seeing massive cost inflation all across. And I think this cost inflation is not temporary. I do think you're seeing permanent inflation in the supply chain because of constraints. Everything is harder to do. The world is less friendly than it used to be. Transaction costs, operating costs are going up for everyone. Everything is just more difficult. So the advantage of a diversified, high quality royalty company, which gets paid off the revenue line, not being subject to capital or operating costs, I don't think there's ever been a greater advantage of a royalty company versus an operator than exists today. And so the way that we see it is that this is simply the best way to participate in what is happening on assets that will be developed by the strongest operators. Because again, everything you're seeing in the world, I think you're seeing the emergence of strong hands in every sector who will thrive irrespective, and who will have the resources and the capability and the financing backing to actually be successful. We acquire the royalties on that generation of assets that will be successful. And so being able to get the royalties on that in diversified form in a company that already covers its expenses, we think it's as compelling an opportunity as exists in the marketplace.
Yeah, excellent. Very compelling. I just wanted to draw on the nickel component, because you mentioned it previously, but also chiefly in copper. We've talked a lot about that, but the nickel's very interesting this week, as what we've seen with the LME, etc.
I would say so, yes.
Where does nickel sit within your portfolio? Is that an area that you're going to be looking at making more royalty streams in?
Well, I think nickel and copper, they're fundamentally different markets. Copper we see as the world's most important commodity, and we don't see a comparable one to copper right now, because it's so critical to everything that's happening, whether it's wind, solar, electric vehicles. It's copper. Nickel, however, strategic nickel deposits are very valuable, because nickel is, as everybody knows, it has two principal uses. One is stainless steel. The other is electric vehicles, which is obviously the big growth driver. And a lot of nickel currently globally comes from places that may not be easy to transact with in the future if you're a Western customer. So if you are a project like Dumont, where we have a royalty, and you're well situated in Canada in the very supportive mining province like Quebec, you can be the pillar of the new EV supply chain in North America. It's an extraordinarily valuable deposit. So we really like those types of fundamentals. However, I don't want to start comparing copper and nickel too much, because copper is so much larger.
Yep.
And it's so much more ubiquitous, but we do think nickel has a very valuable strategic role to play. And nickel deposits in the right jurisdictions that are advanced and permitted or close to permitted or operating are extremely valuable. So we're very happy with our royalty on Dumont, and we'd love to buy more like that as opportunities arise, for sure.
Yep. And just the last point on the sort of royalty streaming model and market, there's a lot of competition in the precious side of things. Obviously, the model's done very well there. You're quite unique in that you're in copper and nickel, as you said. How are you finding the marketplace? Is it becoming increasingly competitive for these tier one discoveries, these high class assets that you mentioned?
It really depends on how your sourcing model works. We don't participate really in these sector-wide processes and things of that nature, which draw obviously a lot of competition. The pricing is very aggressive. We haven't yet seen real value creation opportunities in those types of transactions. Where we focused exclusively is really just bilateral discussions with individual royalty owners. And because we have a local network that allows us to access those opportunities, and we've built those relationships, we find that to be a much more interesting place to be, and that's where we've been successful. So we're built on relationships and trust. Everything we've done is relationships and trust. People trust us, that we treat them in good faith. When you deal with a family, I mean, just for perspective, when you deal with a family that has a royalty, this is the heirloom. This is the family heirloom that they're selling, and so it's a very personal, emotional decision alongside the financial. Right. And this is something that takes time to build those relationships, get their comfort level with Nova and what we're trying to do, that we're honest businessmen, trying to treat them as fairly as we can. And it's really what allowed us to be successful. When we did Taca Taca, one of the best things that's happened in our history, we did it in 2 deals. The first one was 80% cash, 20% stock. And this is right after we went public. And then a few months later, the relationship was built. It wasn't that we started with it. They decided to sell the second half of their royalty on Taca Taca, but this time they took it 80% stock, 20% cash, because they wanted to be a part of what NOVA was building and what we're doing. And for me personally, it was an incredible, humbling experience. It's such an incredible vote of confidence to see something that's so valuable to these people, to take equity, which is the ultimate measure of trust. So, and this isn't the only time it's happened. It's happened with the World and Rosemont transaction as well, and the others. And so we're always very appreciative and humbled by how much people believe in NOVA and that they want to be a part of it. But it's it really just comes down to trust, and that's really where our most successful transactions have come. And we see opportunities for more. So no, look, we're very happy with the deals we've done. We think the pricing that we've achieved has been very good in terms of making sure that the benefits from transactions flow to shareholders. But it's always a balance because you need to do, I think, good, fair deals at the right time. And if you can do that regularly on top-notch assets, then the returns to the company are exceptional over time. Because if you look at the success stories in the mining sector, it's always the good assets that keep on compounding. And you want to be positioned to benefit from that compounding. And we really feel like the portfolio we have today, we're in an excellent position.
Certainly, very good. Well, Alex, thanks very much for sharing your insights on NOVA. It's really interesting to hear about what you're building, levels of trust and confidence that you've created within your sector. So thanks a lot for sharing that, and we look forward to speaking again on Assay TV.
Excellent, Adam. Thank you very much for your time. It's a pleasure to be here.
Cheers.